Welcome to Ring Talk. Welcome back to Ring Talks. I haven't been here for a while. With myself, Martin Theobald, and with the head of Goodwin Boxing, Steve Goodwin. How are you, Steve?
I'm very good, Mr. Theobald. How's everything?
Very well, very well. And you've been a little bit unwell yourself, and you've been away on holiday and things. So for anyone
Had a bit of pneumonia that laid me low for about 4 weeks, and I had 2 weeks away, so I was 6 weeks off really. But we are
yeah,
we were still doing bits and bobs, but we weren't fully operational. But Josh is great. He looks after things when I wasn't around. Wasn't able to do a lot, so things all ticked on. We've got all the shows lined up for September and October. Hasn't stopped us doing everything, and everything's looking promising. So it's all good. And we've obviously had great success, more title wins, and many more to come over the next few months.
we're going to come on to all these things very shortly. But the most obvious place, because I've been getting pelters about the fact that we didn't sit down last week and do this. So instead, I had to get Brad to come on and do an interview instead. But to get your view on,
I was in Stockholm watching Pink, so that's with the wife doing my husbandly thing. So
that's very much a Mrs. Goodwin thing, isn't it? It's
exactly.
yeah. But yeah, prior to that, so Brad Pauls, the first ever Goodwin Boxing managed boxer from debut through to British title. Yeah, it's not for me to talk about it. It's for you. How special was that as a night? And
Amazing. Now we've had British title winners before, and they've been great, and it's been exciting. Frank Leone and Zak Chelli. It's been amazing those nights when they both won. Brad's been with us for 9 years, from his debut in 2015 to winning the British title in 2024. We've gone every step of the way, gone through all the highs, the lows, the loss to Tyler Denny, the work, the real looking in why that went wrong, what he did wrong, what he needed to do to improve it. He put all that in place. We then rectified that. He stayed loyal to both his trainer from day one and to me from day one. He's never changed trainer, never changed manager, and he's had his just rewards. And it was the most amazing night for him, and he deserved every bit of that for what he's done, what he's put into it, and how he's recovered from the Tyler Denny loss.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for those that haven't seen it, last week I did an interview with Brad, so go back and look at that because it was really interesting to go back through his debut on a Goodwin boxing show, sort of through the years and the different places that he's boxed at and his journey that he's been through. And hopefully what comes through on that is what a nice bloke Brad is. And I know you and I know that because we've known him for years, but I think over the last sort of 2 weeks, there are lots of snippets that people would see of him, sort of 5-minute interviews here and there. But actually to sit down and go through all that stuff, you get a real feel for he's just a lovely bloke who's hard as nails and punches really hard and can box a fair old bit. But
and I do want to say, I did feel sorry for Nathan Heaney afterwards because, I think he is a really, really nice man, and what he's achieved. I've sent him a message. I said, "You're a legend for what you've achieved, and you need. I know you're going to carry on. And Brad will rematch you if that's what everybody wants to happen. But for me, if it was Nathan Heaney against anybody else other than one of my fighters, I'd want him to win. And I remember cheering him when he beat Denzel Bentley. So I felt sorry for him that his dream had come to the end. But obviously, for Brad, I was elated. So it was just totally an amazing experience, really, to watch it and to cheer Brad on.
Otherwise engaged, but Josh was able to make it there and sort of represent Goodwin boxing in the arena.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had two choices. I had my wife's best friend's 60th birthday. If it was anybody else's, I could have avoided it. But I had a real choice, and it was probably go to watch Brad and end up with a huge divorce on my hands, or go to the 60th birthday. And it was a debate. But the 60th birthday won, and I stayed married. But no, it was something where it was a place I had to go, and I rang Brad, explained it to him. Josh went, so that was fine. But it was really something where if there was anybody else's birthday, I would have gone to the boxing, but I just couldn't avoid that one.
but you were able to find a
Possibly.
place to go and watch it live
Yeah.
during said party. And
My God, it was like we had a hotel room because we booked a hotel room there. We had a laptop. So it ended up being that I was just going to go off and watch the fight. It ended up being me, Trisha, Olivia, Kieran, all in the room screaming our heads off at the thing. So, and then we went back to the party an hour later, but it was just amazing. It was, I mean, the Olivia filmed our behaviour in there. We couldn't put it out live because it's quite embarrassing when you look back at it, but we were going mad in there. It was brilliant. But, you know, you couldn't have wanted, you know, yeah, it was so wonderful to see Brad do it. So wonderful.
so, as his manager, when did you next speak to Brad after he won on the Saturday night?
About 10 minutes after the fight, he FaceTimed me from the dressing room. So I was sitting in the hotel room and then my phone rang and it was Brad on the WhatsApp. So he messaged me to say thank you and I said, you know, everything else. So no, he messaged me literally as soon as he got back to the dressing room, which was really, I thought that was a really nice touch, by the way. It was really nice.
That's a brilliant. Yeah, again, it says a lot about the man himself. Have you sat down with him, sort of, with all the emotion out of the way of the night, and had like the sensible, sort of level-headed conversation about? And I realise that what's next is going to be some, not all out of your hands, and there'll be, you know, powers of discussion and such like. But to have that discussion about where his career goes after that.
Well, the first thing is what I can say is Frank Warren has options. It wasn't because it was a voluntary defence. When it's a voluntary defence, as the challenger, you give rights to the promoter. If it's a mandatory defence, you don't give any rights to anybody. You have total control after the fight. But obviously, if Frank Warren wants to deal with Brad going forward, Frank Warren has that option. So we will see. Frank's got to exercise that option if he wants to do that. But if he does, we're there and we're able. But that's something for the future. But from now, Brad's having 4 weeks off in Cornwall, down in Newquay, and then he's going to come back here, and then we're going to all go out for a meal to celebrate, which we're all arranging, and we're going to go, and then at that point we'll have a chat through where the options are. Now, Brad's first thing is Nathan Heaney was asking him for the rematch, so Brad said, well, if he wants to do that, I'll honour it back. But obviously that will be down to Nathan himself and Frank Warren. If they want to pursue other options, then that's up to them. But if they wanted to do the trilogy and the board approved it, Brad would be more than happy to do it. But a lot of that's going to rely on Frank and Nathan to make that decision. And we'll wait. We will speak to them in due course.
The one thing with options, so without going into the legalities, because I know there'll be contracts and things that can't be discussed around it. But I was thinking of the scenario. Take, for instance, Hamza Shiraz is fighting Tyler Denny on the undercard of Joshua Dubois. Hamza Shiraz is probably a fight in an ideal world you don't really want to be signing up for, right? I mean, not to say Brad couldn't beat him, but of all the options to sort of have a first defense of your British title, mine wouldn't be to go for Hamza Shiraz. If he goes and wipes out Tyler Denny in 2 rounds, he goes even further down that list of who I'd want to have that first defense against. But should Frank turn around and say, right, I'm exercising my options, your fight is against Hamza Shiraz, as a manager, what are the rights at that point that you're allowed to do?
What you can say is that and I can't go into more detail, when you sign a contract, you sign obviously confidential information, but it's also specified in the contract who, what for, how, and every option contract will have certain things written into it. And you know what you're signing up for when you do the fight. When you are taking a voluntary defense against Nathan Heaney, who could have fought somebody else, and you really, really wanted that fight, remember that Brad, his whole ambition was to win a British title. So if we don't agree to conditions and options, we don't get the fight.
Yeah.
So it was all about that fight and that win. And then we'll deal with what we have to deal with or who we have to fight afterwards.
Yeah. And again, it's not to say that Brad couldn't beat Hamza Shiraz, because based on the heart and determination, grit and power that he showed against Heaney, you know, I chatted with him in the interview that we did. you know, if you turn around and said, actually, he's taking the Denzel Bentley route and he's going off to Vegas to fight for a world title in his next fight, I wouldn't rule him out of that either. You know, there's.
I mean, it really does depend on what way Frank wants to deal with it. He could feel, I'm not really bothered about Brad too much. I'll try and get him beaten. It's the same, but that's not Frank. That's anybody with an option clause. Or you could think, no, I want to work with him going forward and try and build him. That is Frank's prerogative. That's down to him. That's down to
Yeah,
him.
or as you say, he may decide it's not for me at all anyway, and not exercise.
You don't have to. You don't. Nobody has to exercise an option that they take. An option is purely what an option is. But every single fight, by the way, that is a voluntary defence of anything, always has options.
Yeah,
and that's whether it's Frank, Eddie, Sky, everybody else. Every promoter in the world takes out options, and that's standard practice. Derek Chisora would probably have signed options to fight Joe Joyce. I think it's standard practice, and then and that's fair enough. And then the promoter has got some sort. He doesn't want a title to leave his stable on a voluntary basis. They take the risk on a mandatory basis.
yeah, it's a safeguarding option, isn't it?
Nothing wrong with that. It's normal practice. Normal practice.
When would you anticipate that you sort of have that conversation with Frank or with whoever else it may be at Queensbury?
It's up to them it's up to them. Within the terms and timings, they have a right to exercise what they need to exercise. They don't have to communicate with us until the time period for exercising the option, whatever that time period is. That's the same for all promoters. So, you know, we can ring them, but there's not much point. The ball is in the promoter's court who has options on fighters. That's how it works across the board.
I always find it fascinating that, like, because Brad isn't theirs as such, you know, he is under the terms of that options for how many fights, but he's not Hamza, he's not Dennis McCann, where they've had him from day one and they're building him on that platform. It almost seems to me like, what if they just forgot about it? Like, what if they forgot that they've got these, like, if they forget that Brad Pauls is there and
they're not their team are too good at their job to forget anything. And but yeah, they've got, you know, the bottom line is, you know, like Ashley Lane, they would have had an option on him, and then they got him beaten by one of their other kids on his option clause.
Yeah.
So they have the right to do what they want, but then promoters can put exercise options and put somebody in with somebody, think that their guy's going to win, their guy might lose. Doesn't mean they're going to win because they exercise an option. Or they could turn around. And it all depends on how a promoter wants to be. We can go on. We'll talk about Zak Chelli in a minute. Similar type of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's totally down to Frank how he wants to play it, and rightfully so. And this is standard practice. But
yeah, it's one of those things. I described this to my wife not long back about what options are in contracts. She couldn't get her head around it. As a non-boxing person, of like, right, well, you're signing to fight them, but if they win, then you have to do something. And like in boxing, it's just accepted, isn't it, that is standard practice and that's how it works. And if you want the opportunity,
if you don't sign options, you don't get the fight you want.
Then somebody else will sign it. Yeah.
The other thing, if Brad was 23 years of age at the time, then what he may have done is decided, I will not sign this. I'll get myself made mandatory so I don't have to do options. But he's 31. It's different. Yeah. So therefore, in that instance, you sign options, because the other way of if you want to avoid options, then that's fine. But then from Brad's point of view, he's won the British title. Whatever comes now. He's already achieved his goal. Anything else is a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you never know. With that power, anything is possible.
Yeah, it's what I'm saying with him, is that sort of those world title fights, it's not a division that's got Golovkin and Canelo at the top of it these days. It's a division where it's got Janibek, who somewhat of an unknown quantity still, I think, because he isn't tested, because there aren't the other top fighters in that division.
I can't imagine, though, Hamza Shiraz beating Tyler Denny and wanting to fight Brad Pauls. Can you really see Hamza Shiraz? He'll be European champion. Unless he's got really stuck and he hasn't got a world title opportunity. I'm not saying he won't, but that would be, in my opinion, that would be something that he thinks he's doing as an interim position, because he's got nothing else on. But really, I'd imagine he would want to go on to world title level. You got Denzel Bentley in their stable. Denzel has already won the British title. Does he want to come back for the British again? Maybe he does. Maybe he will. There's a lot of things, but I mean, Frank's got those fighters. So what Frank, I would imagine, would do is look at what he's got with those two. Look at Brad sitting there with an option to fight for the British. Decide if any of those two, he's going to put him with Brad for the British or Heaney.
Yeah.
And then work around that. And then decide if none of them want to fight Brad, then Frank would make a decision whether he wants to promote Brad. So, but that's all. I would imagine but that's totally their prerogative, and they're entitled to have that prerogative.
And who knows? Could end up on a card in Saudi. Could end up.
Anything is possible, isn't it? Anything is possible.
But sort of the opportunities have opened up so much. Sort of, it's almost hard not to dream about what those things could be. Which is brilliant.
Can I also say, I want to say something else, because a lot of times people say things about Frank Warren and his team, and they were perfect to deal with. They were really, really good. They paid bang on time. It's no problem. We've had 2 fights and they've been brilliant. They looked after Brad before the fight really well, and they've been perfect thereafter. So I want to say thank you to the way that they looked after everybody.
Brilliant, which is good to hear. Awesome. Anything else you want to add on Brad? I mean, it's sort of we've waxed lyrical.
No more in due course, won't we? But I'd imagine we won't know anything for a month or so.
Right. All right. Well, when we do, we'll let people know.
Once we're allowed to, promote has to announce first. But once we are allowed to say, we will say. But there is, we'll wait and see.
So the other Goodwin boxing British champion that's currently in the stable, Zak Chelli, fighting up in Barnsley, which isn't a place known for its boxing particularly, but Oakwell Stadium this Saturday night against Callum Simpson, who, let's be frank about it, I think Sky are looking to build Callum Simpson into something bigger than what he presently is.
Correct.
I don't think it's wrong to say that.
100%. It's the Callum Simpson show, not the Zak. From Sky's point of view, Zak Chelli is honouring an obligation to defend his title as a mandatory position, but he is not the Sky preferred fighter, because they're not. He's the B. As far as Sky are concerned, he's the B side, but he's the B side can upset the A side. And obviously the B side's always going to remember that he was the B side and not the A side if he wins. So when they put all their eggs in one basket for Callum Simpson, which is really what Ben Shalom is doing.
100%.
And I think that's fair. Doesn't matter, like Kevin, who works at Sky, says to me, I'm not bothered if I've got no bias to Callum Simpson. He hasn't. But Ben Shalom does. And Ben Shalom is the promoter. And Ben Shalom, it's all about Callum Simpson, and Zak's there to get beat. When you adopt that policy, you better hope you're right.
Yeah, I mean, from an objective perspective, because I'm not involved in any of those conversations that go on around it, but if you are willing to take the fight to Barnsley, the hometown of the challenger, put it on in their football stadium, and that's the fighter that you've promoted all through the years and built them up, then there is an obvious A-side, B-side bias.
And therefore that's their call, isn't it? And there's also the point that a lot of it's commercially driven as well, which I understand. I'm not silly enough to not get that. But, the point is, if they're convinced, obviously, Callum Simpson wins. But if they get it wrong, if they've got this wrong, and I think they could well have this wrong, then you've lost the title, haven't you? Because your title is out of your hands unless you then strike a deal with the fighter who was the B side. So that's a very, but that's the prerogative of them. And I understand the commercialization and the commercial aspect behind it. I do get it, but when you back in these horses and going this big on them, you've got to hope to get it right. And the bookies have got it. I'm quite surprised at the bookies' odds, to be fair. I mean, Zak Chelli's nearly 3-1.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. And I say the same thing now. Callum Simpson's a hype job, total hype job. When he gets hit, when he's put on the back foot and gets hit, he's not the same fighter. Now, doesn't mean hype jobs can't become the reality, but his amateur experience is nowhere near what Zak Chelli is. Zak Chelli beat Ben Whittaker and the likes as an amateur. Zak Chelli's mixed in a far higher level as a professional. He's been in deep waters, in big fights. Callum Simpson's been in none. In fact, he's been in with nobody who can hit him back. So that you're going to see on Saturday, it's all about his sparring stories and stuff like this. But to me, when you have a hype job against somebody who's been there, seen there, done it, most of the time the hype jobs get beat. Because normally, to me, you get, I don't know, you're going to use Dennis McCann. He's not a hype. He's not a hype job. He's a man with multi talents as an amateur all the way through. When you get these guys that have got no amateur experience at all, they look good as a professional, but they beat nobodies all the way through. It doesn't always go so well when somebody hits them back. So we will see. If Simpson comes out on top, full credit to him. We'll say Sky have got it right. And he wasn't a hype job. But if he gets beat, which I think he will, in all probability, be beaten by the tougher, classier man with the better amateur experience, then they've got this well wrong.
I do find it a strange pathway that Callum Simpson's had to being a mandatory challenger for the British title. His last fight was the African guy that they'd sort of flown over that, as Zak Chelli was pointing out during one of his interviews recently, like, I don't know how many losses he'd had, but more than he'd had wins. Isn't a standard sort of preparation to put you in place for a British title fight. But whatever, like, that's not for me to question, but it's just it's an observation, really. Of
let's see if they've got it right. Because listen, it's Saturday night, you'll see if they've got it right. But when you throw everything at one fighter and you make another fighter totally and utterly the B-side, right? Who is the champion, remember? Who, if he wins today, will have won the British and defended it.
Yeah.
You need to make sure as a promoter you're making the right calls. And, you know, yeah, you just do. You just do need to make sure you've got this right. And we'll see whether we've got it right on Saturday night. And so
you're going up Saturday night. You'll be at Oakwell.
No, we're going up Thursday. We'll go up Thursday. And we'll go up Thursday. We'll be there till Sunday morning. And we'll be there for the weigh-in on Friday and everything like that. So we'll be up there. And I'm fully expecting on Saturday night to still manage 2 British champions.
Which will be brilliant. Like, it'll be such a high as the sort of summer comes in, that impasse around boxing a little bit throughout August.
Be great. Barry O'Connell, who is he's not somebody O'Connell. He's so certain Zak Chelli stops Callum Simpson. He doesn't think he just beats. He beats him. He said he stops him. He said Barry thinks this is an easier fight than Callum.
Wow. Yeah, and Barry's he's had an opportunity now. He didn't really have that opportunity before the Jack Cullen fight to impose his will and style upon Zak. This is the first time he's had him for that elongated period prior to a fight, a full camp. Done things the Barry way with him.
Yeah, and look, I've never heard him so confident in my life, Barry. Never as confident as he is. I mean, he's saying they've just got this so wrong. So wrong. He said there's going to be some Ben Shalom's in America, and Barry said it's the best place for him to be because he wouldn't want to see him crying.
So Ben's not going to be there.
No, he's going to I think he's going to the Riyadh card.
Oh, the Terence Crawford one. Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, but Barry said it's a good place for him to be because he'd be crying in Barnsley. He said, and he don't want to see a grown man cry.
And not in Barnsley.
Barnsley.
Love Barnsley. It's a great place. Great place. We'll move on. So we're going to discuss some of the fights. Well, actually, one that I wanted to touch on before we go on to October. Linus Udofia is fighting 14th of September, isn't it?
He's fighting against
Dan Catlin.
Dan Catlin, which was a final eliminator for the English, but should now be upgraded to the full version. Now Brad has become British champion. We had it all. This was all the plan. So hopefully, all God willing, that all goes through to plan. On the 14th of September, Linus Udoka will become a two-time English champion, and then he will then go on and aim to hunt down the British. Obviously, not while Brad is champion, but he'll be aiming to get in the British mix.
This is where you get all excited, isn't it? This is where you've got multiple pieces on the table that you can start to position within. How do you get them to next? Because Brad and I were discussing last week about you've then got Ellis Stewart underneath them that you move towards Southern area at some
Don't
point.
forget Mitchell Frierson. Don't forget a guy that's got Jermaine Williams, who did fight for the Southern area and just got locked being a close decision. George O'Leary undefeated. We've got some good middleweights all the way coming through to titles. So you've got, hopefully, Linus, Brad will be British champion. Linus will then be English champion. And we'll have Mitchell Frierson, Ellis Stewart, George O'Leary, Jermaine Williams, all coming up underneath them. We've got it all pretty much rolling.
Yeah. So it's where you start to get excited about. I see you get reinvigorated about boxing when you've got all the pieces that you can start to strategize with. So yeah, just wanted to give a quick mention to that one. 14th of September. Tickets.
One other thing to mention. Sorry, Sajid Abid. News on Sajid Abid. He's fighting for the central area title in October.
Wicked.
We got him a fight. So he came down to see us. We manoeuvred him in the position, got it sent to purse bids, done a deal, and now Sajid's going for the central area title. So, and I'm confident he can win that as well. And so it's another bit of news for our fighters. We're working hard in all divisions. So I'm excited about the super lightweight division as well.
And he's a lovely guy.
He is.
He's a lovely guy, like such a decent bloke.
But we've got that, and we're doing that. We've got Sajid doing the central area. We've got an English, the southern area. We're lining that one up as well, which we can come through in a minute.
You start branching out, going up central. Get out of our territory, Goodwin. Yeah, the other card we're going to go into, we can't give all of the fights that are on this card, partly because some of it needs to be sort of finalised, I guess, partly because we'd be here for the next half an hour, because I promise you watching this, Steve told me all of the fights that are being lined up for the 12th of October. It's ridiculous. I promise you, like the level of fights, the number of fights, the belts on the line, all of it. 12th of October, just pencil it in your diary and make sure you get a ticket.
If it holds, it will be the best non-TV card ever seen in the UK.
Yeah. I wouldn't disagree.
By a mile. By a mile.
And I don't say this sort of for hyperbole, but if 2 or 3 fights fall out of it, it's still in the conversation for the best non-TV card
of all time. Of all time.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, which fights can you discuss?
Okay, so I can let. So there's 2 English titles that I can announce. The first one is Yusuf Kamari, who was on Matchroom, fighting Levi Kinciona for the English lightweight title. And Yasser Al-Gainer fights the undefeated James Scarrett for the English super lightweight title. So you've got Yasser Al-Gainer 12-0, Scarrett 6-0. He's Midlands area champion. Yasser is Southern area champion, meeting for the English title. And then Yusuf, who's still hasn't won a title. I managed him for 3 years. He went to Dylan White for a couple of years, then came back, and I promised him we'll get him a title shot this year. We've delivered that for him, and he's got Levi Kinciona, so that can be announced. I can announce 3 Southern area titles, and this is not them all. Obi Egbeniki against the undefeated Tyrone King for the Southern area super welterweight title.
It's a good fight. A
rescheduled fight of Timon Duglin, Ross McGuigan for the Southern area light heavyweight title, which would be a really good fun fight. And Denis Denikachev against Matthew King, the Southern area super lightweight title fight. So I can announce those. The rest of the card, for which there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 potential more title fights we're working through. And remember, we've already announced 5, so we've still got other things to go through and other potential fights to add to the show. including the return of Jamie Smith at heavyweight on the card.
Okay.
The show is just unbelievable. And I've not only announced, and there's more title fights to announce. There has never been anything like this. I can't fit all the title fights on that card. We're going to have to shelve some.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing.
To go back and give some context to some of those people that may not realise, you've got Yasser El-Gainer fighting undefeated Central Area top. If you haven't seen Yasser fight, he is a ridiculous talent. Now, I don't know a lot about his opponent, if I'm honest, but Yasser's performances, his last two fights, have just been electric. Exceptional fighter. You've got Yusuf Kamari, who, how he's not won a title in his career, I don't know, but people be familiar enough with him. Well, they're probably not as familiar.
I'll tell you why, because he was badly managed after he left me.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do know.
I'm just going to say that, whether the people like it or not, if you've had him for I've done 3 years of preparation and you've had him for 2 years and he hasn't won a title, then to me, something's wrong. And therefore, I've got to say that. Whether you, and I'd say that the same if somebody came to me with Yusuf's resume after 3 years and I didn't win a title with him, I'd blame myself. I wouldn't blame the fighter.
Agree. And for those that haven't seen Yusuf since he's come back home to Goodwin, he's a changed fighter. Whatever they're doing with him in the gym, he's a front foot aggressive fighter now. He's really he's lost some of the passiveness that he had.
He told me though, he said he's happy again. He said to me, the reason he's fighting like this, he feels happy, contented, and he feels looked after.
Yeah, I know when I've chatted with Xavier Miller, his trainer, he sort of said he's, we're into a second phase of his career now, and it's a different version that you're going to see of him, and it is, and it's exciting. Dublin versus
Ross McGuigan.
Ross McGuigan, for those that haven't seen him, front foot aggressive, hard man. He knows his limitations, I'm sure, from seeing him and sort of talking to him. But that Southern Area is the world title for Ross. He's of an age where it's kind of now or never. He will give everything in that fight, and Dublin can bang as well. But Ross, he's a hard, tough man. That'll be an exciting. Someone gets stopped in that. That's my prediction. Danikachev, former English champion, dropping down to do the Southern Area again.
I'll tell you why that is, though. Because Yasser's got the English sewn up. And Dennis, what does he do? He can't fight. He might as well, rather than do a 6th rounder, he may as well go and pick up his old title again. Because at least he's fighting for something worth something. He'll become a 2-time Southern Area champion.
Yeah.
And that makes more sense than doing a 6th rounder. He wants a competitive fight. He wants to put himself back in the mix. And it will put him back in line for the English title again.
Yeah, and what you're getting for that as a fan is you're seeing an English level fighter fighting for the Southern Area. So you're seeing a top talent in Danikachev. And
it's not, and we're not
going to fight a level below him, because it isn't necessary. It's a quality fight.
And that's just, and what we're covering there, you've covered, and the Egbeniki King fight, which is King 5-0, it's a great fight. I mean, it's a great fight. And and that's not it. Some of the best fights on the card we haven't even announced yet.
No, I know what the other ones are as well, and they're equally as good. The other half of it. So October the 12th, make sure you.
I'll tell you what, 1 million percent sells out. Yeah. Well before these, I'd be made, if it's not sold out by the start of first week in September, I will be absolutely shell shocked.
Yep. No, I agree. I say when you're able to. Hopefully we'll do it again next week and maybe able to announce a couple more fights out of that. Perhaps we'll see.
Well, we should be able to announce. We should be able to. Well, be the week after. Probably when you get back from Turkey next week. Next week is the Southern Area meeting, and the week after is the main board meeting. Once we get through those two, we'll be able to announce a whole lot.
Yeah, bro. All right, so keep an eye out, and we'll make sure we discuss them. But 12th of October, go and get tickets via myfighttickets.com, isn't it?
You link into that through the Goodwin Boxing website. So if you go to the tickets on the Goodwin Boxing, it will take you into My Fight Tickets.
Yeah. So make sure you go and do that. Get them in early, because it will sell out, and it'll be just a ridiculous night of boxing.
And it's not going to be streamed live. Nobody's going to be able to see it without going. We're not having none of this nonsense of putting it on the internet where boxers lose ticket sales, the atmosphere dies. No, we're not doing that. We're going, you want to go, don't send me a message saying, where can I watch it? You can only watch it at your call.
Yeah, I'll tell you can watch it up in the balcony or down on the floors, right?
Yeah.
And you'll have an exceptional evening, so get a ticket.
Yeah, go and pay towards it to help the whole small hall boxing scene thrive rather than expect free content online.
Exactly, exactly. Right, Steve, that's it for our return for week 1. We'll be back again next week, hopefully, all
Yeah,
being well.
you will.
And we'll
Before your
come back.
trip to Turkey, and we'll be able to talk about Zak Chelli then and a few more bits and bobs, hopefully.
All being well, and still the British champion and a return from Barnsley. So yeah, good luck up there at the weekend and all the festivities that come with it before that. Which I'm sure you'll be treated well by all the folk at Sky. And
no, they're really good. That again, they look after everybody really well. And
yeah,
you know, I've got to say, and I've got to be honest, all three promoters, Matchroom, Sky, Frank Warren, they really do look after the fighters that go on the show and the teams. So I can't, you know, I've got to say, they do their jobs right, and they do, you know, they do treat people with respect, and you know, full credit to them. The only thing that I would say that I think promoters need to improve on, just to close the show, is go to visit boxers after the fights. They don't do it. And I think that the main promoters, it wouldn't hurt them, and this is all of them, it wouldn't hurt them to go backstage after somebody's competed in a title fight on their show, whether they're the A side or the B side of the card, and go and say well done and say something to them. But they don't, and nobody does that, and I think they should.
there's no reason not to either, because in my head when you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, but if you're third down on the card, so sort of 2 before the main event, then the promoter sort of has to be seen ringside for the next fight. But actually, you've always got 15 minutes of punditry, adverts, etc., etc. It wouldn't take much to nip back into the changing rooms.
And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't, even if it can't be the main guy, it could be the second guy.
Yeah.
So it could be the second guy of that promotional team that does it. I just think if I was gonna, and again, I'm not criticising any of them because I'm just, it's ways to improve. I think it's
an observation rather than a criticism.
I think that the promoters should think we need to do that, and we need to make sure it's somebody's job, and even if it's not the main man, to go backstage and commiserate with the loser, say well done to the winner. I think that goes a long way, and that's the one thing I think is missing generally across the board. And again, I haven't personally been to a Sky. I've been to a Frank Warren and a Eddie Hearn show myself. I haven't done the Sky because I wasn't there when Zak Chelli won, so I'm not sure whether they do that. I'll let you know next week. But again, I don't know. But I think it is something where if they don't do it, that's a little touch that will go a long way.
Yeah. And it's all about goodwill, isn't it, as well, really, and sort of having that touch of class about it. That yeah, well, fingers crossed. Keep us updated next week when hopefully they come back and congratulate Zak on retaining his title in the changing rooms.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm sure you and the whole team will represent Goodwin Boxing with class and such like as usual.
I'm actually joking sort of about Sky because I'd imagine that Kevin would come along, and that is sort of a bit tongue in cheek with Sky because if Kevin's there, I know Kevin would do that if Zak won. So, but generally we're talking about the main promoter people that I think they just need to improve their PR a bit there.
Yeah, and Kev would do it with anyone as well because Kev's a lovely bloke.
That's just Kev, right? But
yeah,
because he appreciates what goes on. He's different. He comes from the small hall level. He knows what the fighters go through. So I'm sure that's something he would do. But I'm just saying, I do think it's something that the promoters could improve upon, because when I was there with Lewis Oakford and Josh was with Brad last week, nobody came to see either one after the fight. So I just think it would have been nice for Lewis, who had lost, and it would have been nice for Brad, who had won, for somebody other than his own team from the promoter say, what a great fight you put on. Thank you so much for coming. Whatever, if you're going to work again or not, I just think it's a touch.
Yeah.
Lewis Oakford fights, he loses. He then goes home gutted because he got hit by an accidental clash. Because Lewis Oakford would have beaten, by the way, I know, he would have beaten
John Hedges.
He would have beaten John Hedges. He was 1 round behind and 1 guard. He would have beaten John Hedges. I have no doubt. And It would have been nice if somebody come see him and said, "Oh, bad luck," or anything, just to make him feel a bit better. But yeah, but anyway, that's just a little, not a rant, but an observation over.
Observation. Well, we'll see how it is after this weekend.
Okay, no worries.
Best of luck to Zach. Give him our best, and we'll catch up next week when hopefully still 2 British champions in the camp.
Take care, Martin. Speak to you next week.
Take care. Bye bye, mate.